You think you knew Looney Tunes? Nah, fam. We all grew up thinking these cartoons were just innocent fun, right? Bugs Bunny eating carrots, Daffy Duck being dramatic, wholesome family entertainment that's been around forever. But what if I told you there's an episode so controversial, so absolutely shocking, that Warner Brothers has been hiding it from you for over 50 years? I'm talking about Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips from 1944, and no cap, this thing will completely destroy everything you thought you knew about your childhood. This isn't just some cartoon that aged poorly or got a little outdated. This is straight up the most banned piece of animation in American history. And the reasons why go way deeper than just being offensive. We're about to dive into 5 mind-blowing revelations about this hidden episode that will make you question everything about the cartoons you grew up watching. From racist propaganda to corporate cover-ups to voice actor secrets that'll make your jaw drop. But here's the thing that's going to absolutely wreck your brain by the end of this video. The real reason this episode disappeared isn't what you think it is. The conspiracy behind why it's still buried today will change how you see every single cartoon for the rest of your life. Trust me, you're not ready for what's coming. The racist cartoon that started it all. All right, let's start with the obvious stuff that everyone thinks they know. Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips dropped in 1944, right in the middle of World War II, and straight up, this thing is racist as hell. We're talking about Bugs Bunny literally fighting Japanese soldiers drawn with buck teeth, thick glasses, and every single stereotype you can imagine. The title alone should tell you everything, using a slur that would get you canceled into oblivion today. But here's what most people don't realize. This wasn't some rogue animator going off script. This was official Warner Brothers propaganda, commissioned by the US government to boost morale during wartime. Bugs Bunny, your childhood hero, was literally being used as a weapon of psychological warfare. The episode shows him outsmarting and humiliating Japanese forces in ways that were designed to make American audiences feel superior and dehumanize the enemy. Watch how they animated the Japanese characters. Every single movement is exaggerated to look bumbling and incompetent. Notice how Bugs doesn't just defeat them, he makes them look like complete fools. This wasn't entertainment, fam. This was systematic dehumanization, packaged as a 7-minute cartoon that kids would watch on Saturday mornings. The episode was shown in theaters across America, playing before movies that entire families would see together. Imagine sitting in a dark theater in 1944, watching Bugs Bunny deliver what was essentially hate speech disguised as comedy, while everyone around you laughed and cheered. That's the America this cartoon was made for. But here's where it gets darker than you could ever imagine. This wasn't just one studio making one bad decision. The level of coordination between Hollywood and the government during this time was absolutely insane. And what they were really doing behind closed doors will make your skin crawl. But that's nothing compared to what happened to the people who actually had to make this thing, because the psychological damage this episode caused to the voice actors and animators involved, that's where this story gets truly twisted. Mel Blanc's secret shame. So you know Mel Blanc, right? The man of 1,000 voices, the absolute legend who brought Bugs Bunny to life. Well, buckle up, because what this episode did to him psychologically is absolutely heartbreaking, and the industry has been covering it up for decades. Picture this, you're Mel Blanc in 1944, and Warner Brothers hands you a script filled with racist dialogue that you have to perform as the character you've made famous. We're talking about the voice of Bugs Bunny, a character that represents American cleverness and charm, being forced to deliver lines that were pure propaganda hate speech. Blanc later admitted in private interviews that this was the darkest period of his entire career. But here's where it gets twisted. Blanc wasn't given a choice. His contract literally required him to voice whatever Warner Bros. Put in front of him, or he'd lose everything. The man who gave us the voice we all associate with childhood joy was essentially held hostage by his own success. He had to perform racist caricatures while knowing millions of kids would hear his voice delivering this poison. The psychological impact was devastating. Blank's family members revealed years later that he would come home from recording sessions visibly shaken. He'd lock himself in his room for hours after voicing these propaganda episodes. Think about that. The man who brought laughter to millions was being destroyed from the inside by the very studio that made him famous. Other voice actors from that era started speaking out in the 1980s about the trauma they experienced. They described feeling like they were betraying their own values, but the studio system was so powerful that speaking out meant career suicide. These weren't just voice acting gigs, they were psychological warfare operations disguised as entertainment. But the real conspiracy? Warner Brothers knew exactly what they were doing to these performers. And they had a plan to make sure none of them would ever talk about it publicly. But what they're still hiding about the corporate machine behind all this will blow your mind completely. Warner Bros.' propaganda partnership. Okay, wrap your head around this because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about how Hollywood actually works. Warner Brothers wasn't just making racist cartoons for fun. They had a literal contract with the United States government to produce propaganda, and the money they were getting paid will make you sick. The U.S. Office of War Information was secretly funding these cartoon propaganda projects, paying Warner Bros. Millions of dollars in today's money to weaponize beloved characters like Bugs Bunny. We're talking about your childhood heroes being turned into government psyop tools, and the studio executives were laughing all the way to the bank. This wasn't patriotism, fam. This was straight up profiteering off of wartime hatred. But here's where it gets worse. Warner Brothers was simultaneously producing these racist American propaganda cartoons while also creating completely different versions for international markets. They had teams of animators working around the clock to edit out the racist content for countries that wouldn't tolerate it, proving they knew exactly how awful this stuff was. They were literally selling hate to Americans while presenting a clean image to the rest of the world. The studio kept detailed records of which episodes went where, creating what industry insiders called the vault system. Certain cartoons existed in multiple versions, some with extreme racism for domestic audiences, others sanitized for international distribution. This wasn't accidental. This was calculated manipulation of entire populations through children's entertainment. Other studios like Disney and MGM were doing the exact same thing, turning animation into a weapon of mass psychological manipulation. The entire industry was coordinating with government agencies to shape public opinion through cartoons that kids would watch over and over again, embedding these messages deep into developing minds. But here's the most devastating part. This system never actually ended. It just evolved. And what they're doing today with streaming platforms and content control is the exact same playbook. Why they're still burying the truth. So you think this is all ancient history? Think again. Because the corporate censorship machine that started with Bugs Bunny nips the nips is more powerful today than it's ever been. And what they're doing right now will absolutely blow your mind. HBO Max, which owns all the Warner Brothers cartoon content, has completely scrubbed this episode from existence. Not just hidden it, not just put a disclaimer on it. They've literally acted like it never existed. But here's the twisted part. They're using the exact same censorship playbook on modern content, deciding what entire generations get to see based on corporate image protection, not actual harm prevention. The streaming algorithms are programmed to make certain content invisible. We're talking about sophisticated AI systems that can detect and suppress any mention of controversial episodes across the entire platform. They've essentially created a digital memory hole where inconvenient history just disappears. Your kids will grow up never knowing these episodes existed unless they specifically go looking for them, which is exactly what Warner Brothers wants. But it gets darker. Internal internal company documents leaked in 2019 revealed that Warner Brothers has an entire department dedicated to content legacy management. These people's literal job is to rewrite entertainment history, editing out anything that might damage the brand. They're not protecting society from harmful content. They're protecting their billion-dollar intellectual property investments. The psychological manipulation is insane. By controlling what people can access, they're controlling what people remember about the past. Think about how many kids today believe cartoons were always wholesome and innocent because they've never seen the propaganda episodes. The studios are literally gaslighting entire generations about their own history. But the final revelation will change everything you thought you knew about why this specific episode is still radioactive after all these years, because the real reason has nothing to do with racism. The episode that shaped animation forever. All right, fam, you ready for the truth that's going to absolutely wreck everything you thought you knew? This isn't just about one racist cartoon from the 1940s. Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips became the blueprint for how corporations control cultural memory, and what they discovered from hiding this episode is still being used to manipulate what you see today. Here's the mind-blowing part. When Warner Brothers first tried to bury this episode in the 1960s, they ran secret focus groups to see how people would react to controversial content being removed. What they found was terrifying. Most people didn't even notice when content disappeared, and the few who did were easily convinced that the censored versions were actually the originals. They had accidentally discovered the perfect method for rewriting history in real time. This episode became the test case for what's now called retroactive content control. Every single streaming platform, every social media company, every entertainment corporation uses the techniques Warner Brothers developed while hiding this cartoon. They learned that if you control access to information long enough, you can literally change what people believe happened in the past. But here's the most devastating revelation that will blow your mind completely. The real reason this episode is still buried isn't because it's racist. Warner Brothers has kept way more offensive content available with simple disclaimers. The real reason is that Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips proves that beloved childhood characters were always corporate propaganda tools. And if people truly understood that, it would destroy the entire entertainment industry's business model. Think about it. If parents realized that Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and every other childhood icon were originally designed as psychological manipulation devices, would they still buy the merchandise? Would they still trust these companies with their children's minds? The entire multi-billion-dollar industry of childhood nostalgia would collapse overnight. So there you have it, fam. One buried cartoon episode exposed an entire system of corporate mind control that's still running today. What other lost episodes do you think are hiding even darker secrets? If this completely blew your mind, smash that subscribe button, because we're just getting started exposing what they don't want you to see.